The dust kicked up around Gabriel Lancaster's boots as he rode into Belmont, Nevada on a scorching July afternoon in 1877, and the first thing he noticed was the woman standing outside the general store with tears streaming down her face while pretending to smile at the man beside her. Gabriel had learned to read people during his years working cattle drives from Texas to Montana, and everything about this particular scene felt wrong. The man next to her, dressed in an expensive suit that seemed out of place in this silver mining town, had his hand clamped around her arm with enough force that Gabriel could see her fingers turning white even from across the street. Gabriel dismounted slowly, tying his horse to the hitching post outside the saloon. He was 26 years old, weathered by sun and hard work, with dark hair that constantly fell into his eyes, no matter how many times he pushed it back. He had come to Belmont looking for work at one of the mines, hoping to save enough money to finally buy that piece of land he had been dreaming about since he was 18. The silver boom had brought prosperity to this corner of Nevada, and with prosperity came opportunity for a man willing to work hard. The woman across the street caught his eye again. She was perhaps 23 or 24, with auburn hair pulled back in a simple bun and a cotton dress that had been mended carefully in several places. Her eyes were the color of spring grass, and right now they held a kind of desperate sadness that made Gabriel's chest tighten. The man beside her said something that Gabriel could not hear, and she flinched visibly before nodding and following him down the wooden sidewalk. Gabriel shook his head and walked into the saloon. It was not his business. He had learned that lesson years ago when he had tried to help a woman in a similar situation in Abilene, and ended up spending 3 days in jail because her husband had connections with the local sheriff. Still, the image of those green eyes haunted him as he ordered a whiskey and asked the bartender about work. "Plenty of work in the mines if you do not mind going underground," the bartender said. He was a stout man with a thick mustache and friendly eyes. "Though most cowboys I know prefer to stay above ground. There's also the Chapman Ranch about 5 miles north. Old Thomas Chapman is always looking for good hands." "I will try the ranch first," Gabriel said, downing his whiskey. "Never did like the idea of being buried alive while I am still breathing." The bartender chuckled. "Cannot say I blame you. Chapman pays fair and treats his men decent. Tell him Floyd sent you." Gabriel thanked him and was about to leave when 3 men walked into the saloon. The one in the middle was the same man who had been gripping the woman's arm outside, and up close, Gabriel could see he was probably in his early 30s with pale blue eyes and a smile that never quite reached them. His 2 companions were clearly hired muscle, the kind of men who solved problems with their fists rather than their brains. "Whiskey all around," the well-dressed man announced loudly, "and make it the good stuff. We are celebrating." "What is the occasion, Mr. Thornton?" Floyd asked, pulling down a better bottle from the shelf. "My upcoming nuptials," Thornton said with that cold smile. 2 weeks from today, I will be marrying the lovely Grace Everett, and her father's land will finally be mine. I mean, ours. Ours, of course." Gabriel felt his jaw tighten, so the woman's name was Grace, and she was being forced into a marriage she clearly did not want. He ordered another whiskey and took a seat at a corner table, listening while pretending not to. "That Everett girl's a pretty thing," one of Thornton's men said. "You are a lucky man, boss." "Lucky has nothing to do with it," Thornton replied. "Her father owed me money, a lot of money. This is simply a business arrangement that benefits everyone involved. She gets to keep her family's ranch, her father's debts disappear, and I get land that borders my property. Plus, a woman to warm my bed and keep my house. Practical on all fronts." Gabriel's knuckles turned white around his glass. He had heard of arrangements like this before, but hearing the callousness in Thornton's voice made his blood boil. Still, it was not his business. He needed to remember that. "I hear her old man is pretty sick," the other hired gun said. "Lung fever or something." "Yes, very convenient timing," Thornton said with a laugh that made Gabriel want to punch him. The old fool should have known better than to gamble with money he did not have, but at least he had something valuable to trade. "That ranch has good water access, and the land is fertile. I've been trying to buy it for 3 years. Gabriel finished his whiskey and left before he did something stupid. He rode north to the Chapman Ranch, and by evening he had a job helping with the cattle and breaking horses. Thomas Chapman was indeed a decent man, gruff but fair, with 3 sons who worked the ranch alongside their father. They gave Gabriel a bunk in the stable and invited him to eat dinner with the family. Over the next few days, Gabriel threw himself into the work, trying to forget about Grace Everett and her sad green eyes. He broke 2 wild horses, repaired fencing on the north pasture, and helped move cattle to better grazing land. But on his 3rd evening at the ranch, he rode into Belmont to pick up supplies for Thomas, and he saw Grace again. She was walking alone this time, carrying a basket, and moving quickly as if she wanted to be invisible. Gabriel guided his horse alongside her, and she looked up with fear in her eyes until she recognized that he was not whoever she had been expecting. "Evening, miss," Gabriel said, tipping his hat. "You look like you're in a hurry." "I need to get home before dark," Grace said softly. Her voice was like honey, sweet and smooth, but there was exhaustion behind it. "My father needs his medicine." "I'm heading north anyway. Can I escort you? It is not safe for a woman alone on these roads." Grace hesitated, glancing around as if expecting someone to jump out and catch her doing something wrong. Finally, she nodded. "That would be kind of you, but just to the edge of town. I do not want anyone to get the wrong idea." Gabriel dismounted and walked beside her, leading his horse. "I'm Gabriel Lancaster. I'm working at the Chapman Ranch." "Grace Everett," she said quietly. "I know the Chapmans. They are good people." They walked in silence for a moment before Gabriel could not help himself. "I heard you're getting married soon." "Congratulations." Grace's step faltered, and for a moment he thought she might cry. Instead, she straightened her shoulders. "Thank you. You do not sound happy about it." "My happiness is not relevant," Grace said, her voice barely above a whisper. "My father is dying. He owes a great deal of money to Richard Thornton. This marriage settles the debt and ensures my father can die in peace in his own home. That is all that matters." Gabriel wanted to tell her there had to be another way, but he had seen enough of the world to know that sometimes there was not. "What about what you want?" Grace stopped walking and looked at him with those devastating green eyes. "What I want stopped mattering the day my mother died 5 years ago. I have been taking care of my father and trying to keep our ranch going ever since. Richard owns half the businesses in Belmont and most of the land around it. When my father gambled away more money than we could ever repay, Richard offered this arrangement. It is the only way." "There is always another way," Gabriel said. But even as he spoke the words, he knew how hollow they sounded. "Not for women like me," Grace said sadly. "But I appreciate your concern, Mr. Lancaster. You barely know me, and yet you seem to care more about my welfare than anyone else in this town." They reached the edge of Belmont, and Grace thanked him before hurrying down a dirt road that led east. Gabriel watched her go, that uncomfortable feeling in his chest growing stronger. He completed his errands and rode back to the Chapman Ranch, but he could not stop thinking about Grace. Over the next week, Gabriel found excuses to ride into Belmont more often than necessary. He told himself it was just to familiarize himself with the town, but the truth was he was looking for Grace. He saw her twice more, always rushing from place to place with that basket of medicine for her father. Each time, he tipped his hat and she gave him a small, sad smile that stayed with him for hours afterward. It was on his 4th trip to town that everything changed. Gabriel was loading supplies into his saddlebags when he heard shouting coming from behind the hardware store. He recognized Richard Thornton's voice immediately, sharp and cruel. But it was the woman's voice that made him drop everything and run toward the sound. He rounded the corner to find Thornton's mother, an elderly woman named Martha who Gabriel had seen around town, cowering against the wall while Thornton stood over her with his fist raised. I told you to stop embarrassing me in front of people," Thornton snarled. "Your opinions are not wanted or needed, old woman." "Richard, please," Martha begged. "I only said that Grace seems like a sweet girl, and you should treat her kindly." "I will treat her however I damn well please. She's going to be my property in less than a week." Gabriel saw Thornton's fist start to descend, and before he could think about the consequences, he grabbed the man's wrist and twisted it hard. Thornton yelped in pain and spun around, his face contorted with rage. "Who the hell do you think you are?" Thornton spat. "Someone who does not think men should beat women," Gabriel said evenly, "especially not their own mothers." Thornton's 2 hired men appeared from around the corner, and Gabriel knew he was in trouble. But he stood his ground, keeping himself between Thornton and his mother. "You just made a very big mistake, Cowboy," Thornton said, cradling his wrist. Do you have any idea who I am? A coward who hits women, Gabriel replied. That's all I need to know. Thornton's face turned purple with fury. Teach him some manners, boys. The two men advanced, but before they could reach Gabriel, Thomas Chapman's voice rang out from the street. I would not do that if I were you, Thornton. Gabriel glanced back to see Thomas and his 3 sons, all armed and looking ready for trouble. Thomas must have seen Gabriel run and followed. Thornton sized up the situation and clearly decided it was not worth the fight. This is not over, Lancaster. Nobody touches me and gets away with it. Then maybe you should stop giving people reasons to want to touch you, Gabriel said. Thornton left with his men, but not before shooting Gabriel a look of pure hatred. Martha Thornton was shaking, and Gabriel helped her to her feet gently. Thank you, young man, she said, tears streaming down her weathered face. My son has not been right since his father died. The power and money have changed him into someone I do not recognize. How long has he been hitting you? Gabriel asked gently. Martha looked away. 3 years. Ever since I criticized a business decision he made. He said I needed to learn my place. It has gotten worse over time. Gabriel felt sick. You should not have to live like that. I have nowhere else to go, Martha said simply. Richard controls everything. My home, my money, everything. I'm trapped. Thomas Chapman put a hand on Gabriel's shoulder. We need to leave before Thornton comes back with more men. Martha, you're welcome at our ranch if you need a place to stay. Martha shook her head. Thank you, but that would only make things worse. Richard would destroy you financially and probably hurt that lovely Grace Everett in the process just to punish everyone involved. He is vindictive that way. Gabriel's blood ran cold. What do you mean? Martha looked at him with sad, knowing eyes. You care about her, I can see it. But you need to understand what my son is capable of. He beats me regularly. He has hurt people who have crossed him. And Grace is about to marry him in 6 days. That sweet, kind girl is going to spend the rest of her life being hurt by a monster, and there is nothing anyone can do about it. There has to be something, Gabriel said desperately. The only thing that would stop this wedding is if Grace ran away, but she would never do that to her dying father. And even if she did, Richard would hunt her down. He always gets what he wants. Gabriel rode back to the Chapman ranch with Thomas and his sons in heavy silence. His mind was racing. Grace could not marry Thornton. She could not spend her life being beaten and broken by a man who hit his own mother. The thought of those green eyes filling with pain and fear made Gabriel want to put his fist through something. That night, Gabriel could not sleep. He kept thinking about Grace, about Martha Thornton's words, about the cold calculation in Richard Thornton's eyes when he had talked about the marriage being a business arrangement. By the time the sun rose, Gabriel knew what he had to do. He rode to the Everett ranch without telling anyone where he was going. The property was smaller than he had expected, with a modest house and a barn that needed repairs. The land itself was beautiful, though, with a creek running through it and good grazing areas for cattle. Gabriel could see why Thornton wanted it. Grace was hanging laundry when he arrived, and she looked surprised to see him. Mr. Lancaster, what are you doing here? Gabriel dismounted and walked toward her, his heart pounding. I need to talk to you about Richard Thornton. Grace's face went pale. I do not think that is appropriate. He beats his mother, Gabriel said bluntly. Regularly. I saw him about to do it yesterday, and she told me it has been happening for years. He is a violent man, Grace. You cannot marry him. Grace dropped the shirt she had been hanging and stared at him. What? I interrupted him attacking Martha Thornton behind the hardware store. She was cowering and begging him to stop. She said he's been hitting her for 3 years, and it keeps getting worse. Grace sank down onto the porch steps, her face ashen. Oh, God. Gabriel sat beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. If he hits his own mother, he will hit you too. You cannot go through with this marriage. I do not have a choice, Grace said, but her voice was shaking now. My father owes Richard $20,000. We lost most of our cattle to drought 2 years ago, and Father borrowed money to try to rebuild the herd. Then he got sick and gambled trying to win enough to pay Richard back. It did not work. The debt kept growing. This marriage is the only way to save our ranch and let my father die in peace. There has to be another way, Gabriel insisted. What other way? Grace asked, looking at him with tears in her eyes. Should I let Richard take our ranch? Watch my father die knowing he lost everything? I've been over this 1,000 times in my mind, Gabriel. There is no other option. Gabriel loved the way his name sounded in her voice, even though the circumstances were terrible. What if someone paid off the debt? Who has $20,000? Grace laughed bitterly. That's more money than most people in this territory will see in their entire lives. Gabriel did not have an answer for that. His own savings amounted to maybe $300, the result of years of careful work and frugal living. It was nowhere near enough. I need to think, Grace said, standing up. My father's inside, dying. He's so happy that I am marrying Richard because he thinks I will be taken care of. It would break his heart to know the truth. And he's so weak now that I'm afraid the shock might kill him. Would that be worse than you spending your life being beaten? Gabriel asked. Grace looked at him with such profound sadness that it took his breath away. I do not know anymore. I just do not know. Gabriel reached out and took her hand without thinking. The moment their skin touched, he felt something shift inside his chest, like a lock clicking open. Grace looked down at their joined hands and then up at his face, and he saw the same recognition in her eyes. I do not even know you, Grace whispered, but when I am with you, I feel like I can breathe for the first time in years. I know, Gabriel said. I feel it too. They stood there for a long moment, hands clasped, neither wanting to break the connection. Finally, Grace pulled away gently. You should go, she said. If Richard finds out you were here, it will make everything worse. Gabriel wanted to argue, wanted to sweep her onto his horse and ride away from this entire mess, but he knew she was right. Instead, he mounted up and looked down at her. I'm not giving up on this, he said. There has to be a way. Grace gave him a small, sad smile. You are a good man, Gabriel Lancaster. I wish I had met you 2 years ago, before everything fell apart. Gabriel rode away feeling more helpless than he had in his entire life. When he got back to the Chapman Ranch, Thomas was waiting for him. You went to see her, Thomas said. It was not a question. I told her about Thornton beating his mother, Gabriel admitted. She deserves to know what kind of man she's about to marry. Thomas sighed and sat down on a hay bale. And what did she say? That she does not have a choice. Her father owes Thornton $20,000. Thomas whistled low. That's a hell of a debt. There has to be a way to help her, Gabriel said desperately. I cannot just stand by and watch her marry a man who's going to hurt her. Thomas studied him for a long moment. You are in love with her. Gabriel opened his mouth to deny it, then closed it again. How could he be in love with someone he barely knew? But the thought of Grace being hurt made him feel like someone was twisting a knife in his gut. The memory of her hand in his made his heart race. The sound of her voice saying his name was burned into his memory. Yes, Gabriel said finally. I think I am. Thomas nodded slowly. Then we need to figure something out. Because Richard Thornton is a dangerous man, and if you try to interfere with this wedding, he will come after you with everything he has. Over the next 3 days, Gabriel worked on the ranch and tried to think of solutions. He considered confronting Thornton directly and demanding he release Grace from their arrangement, but he knew that would only result in violence. He thought about talking to the sheriff, but Floyd at the saloon had mentioned that Thornton practically owned the law in Belmont. He even considered trying to convince Grace to run away with him, but she would never leave her dying father. On the 4th day, Martha Thornton showed up at the Chapman Ranch. She had a black eye and was limping, and Gabriel felt rage boil up inside him. He found out I talked to you, Martha said quietly. He was waiting for me when I got home that night. This was my punishment. Thomas took Martha into the house while Gabriel paced outside, trying to calm down. When Thomas came back out, his face was grim. She wants to help Grace, Thomas said. She said she will testify about Richard's violence if it comes to that. She is willing to risk everything to save that girl from the life she's been living. Testify where? Gabriel asked. Thornton owns the sheriff. There is no law here that will touch him. Then we need to make sure Grace does not go through with the wedding, Thomas said, even if it means her father loses the ranch. That night, Gabriel rode back to the Everett property. This time he was not going to be polite or careful about being seen. He knocked on the door, and Grace opened it looking exhausted. When she saw him, Something like relief crossed her face. "Gabriel, you should not be here." "I know, but I need you to hear me out." Gabriel took a deep breath. "I met Martha Thornton today. She has a black eye because Richard found out she talked to me. Grace, he's going to do the same thing to you, maybe worse. You cannot marry him." Grace's eyes filled with tears. "My father is dying, Gabriel. He has maybe 2 weeks left. The doctor came yesterday and said there's nothing more they can do. If I do not marry Richard, my father will die knowing he destroyed our family's legacy. I cannot do that to him." "What about your legacy?" Gabriel asked. "What about your life? Grace, you deserve to be happy. You deserve to be loved and cherished, not beaten and used." "I barely know you," Grace said, but there was no conviction in her voice. Gabriel stepped closer. "You know me well enough. You know I would never hurt you. You know that when I hold your hand, something feels right for the first time in a long time. You know that I am falling in love with you, even though it makes no logical sense given the circumstances." Grace let out a sob. "Stop. Please stop." "I cannot," Gabriel said, "because in 5 days you are going to marry a monster, and I am going to have to live the rest of my life knowing I did nothing to stop it. I cannot do that, Grace. I cannot just let you go." "Then what are you suggesting?" Grace asked, tears streaming down her face. "That I run away with you? Leave my dying father? Lose everything my family has worked for?" "Yes." "Pia," Gabriel said simply. "I'm suggesting exactly that. Come with me. We will go somewhere Richard Thornton cannot find us, somewhere you will be safe." "And my father?" "Thomas Chapman has already said he will look after your father. He will make sure he is comfortable and cared for until the end. Your father will be in good hands." Grace shook her head. "I cannot. It would kill him to know I abandoned him." "Grace," Gabriel said gently, taking both her hands in his, "if your father loves you, truly loves you, would he want you to sacrifice your entire life for 2 weeks of his comfort? Would he want you to marry a man who will hurt you?" "He does not know about Richard's violence." "Then tell him." Grace pulled her hands away and wrapped her arms around herself. "I'm so tired, Gabriel. I am tired of making impossible decisions. I am tired of being responsible for everything. I am tired of being strong when all I want to do is fall apart." Gabriel moved closer and very carefully put his arms around her. For a moment, Grace stood stiffly, and then she collapsed against his chest and sobbed. Gabriel held her while she cried, stroking her hair and murmuring comforting words. He felt her heartbeat against his chest and knew with absolute certainty that he would do anything to protect this woman. When Grace finally pulled away, her eyes were red but clearer. "I do not know what to do." "Let me help you," Gabriel said. "Let me be the one who takes care of you for once. You have been carrying this burden alone for too long." Before Grace could respond, a weak voice called from inside the house. "Grace? Who is at the door?" Grace wiped her eyes quickly. "Just a neighbor, Papa. I will be right there." She looked at Gabriel helplessly. "I need to go." "Think about what I said," Gabriel urged. "You have 5 days. Please, Grace, do not marry him." Gabriel rode back to the Chapman ranch, feeling fractured. He had told Grace the truth about his feelings, but he still did not have a solution to her impossible situation. The next morning, Gabriel was mucking out stalls when Thomas came to find him. "Got news from town. Richard Thornton has been bragging that after the wedding, he's planning to sell the Everett ranch to a mining company. Says the land has silver deposits and he can make triple what it is worth in livestock." Gabriel felt sick. "So Grace is sacrificing herself for nothing. He's going to sell the ranch anyway." "Looks that way," Thomas said grimly. "Thought you should know." Gabriel dropped the pitchfork and headed for his horse. He had to tell Grace. She needed to know that her father's legacy would be gone, regardless of whether she married Thornton. Maybe that would be enough to convince her to run. He pushed his horse hard and reached the Everett ranch by mid-morning. This time, Grace was not alone. A doctor's buggy was parked outside, and Gabriel's heart sank. He tied up his horse and knocked on the door. The doctor answered, a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a weary expression. "Can I help you?" "I'm a friend of Grace's. Is everything all right?" The doctor glanced back into the house. "Mr. Everett took a turn for the worse last night. I do not think he has much time left, perhaps a day or two at most." Gabriel felt torn. This was terrible news for Grace, but it also meant she would not have to worry about breaking her father's heart by calling off the wedding. Before he could decide what to do, Grace appeared in the doorway. "Gabriel," she said quietly, "come in." He followed her into the modest house. It was clean and well kept despite the obvious financial struggles. Grace led him to a bedroom where an emaciated man lay in bed, his breathing shallow and labored. This was Grace's father, John Everett, and he was clearly dying. "Papa, this is Gabriel Lancaster," Grace said softly. "He works at the Chapman Ranch." John's eyes focused on Gabriel with effort. "Chapman, good man, good family." His voice was barely a whisper. "Yes, sir," Gabriel said, feeling uncomfortable. "You look at my daughter the way I used to look at her mother," John said, and Grace's face flushed. "I see it." Gabriel did not know what to say to that. John coughed weakly, and Grace was immediately there with water. After he drank, John looked at Gabriel again. "Richard Thornton. You know him?" "I have met him," Gabriel said carefully. "Good man, rich, powerful. Take care of my Grace." John's eyes closed briefly. "I can die happy knowing she will be all right." Gabriel looked at Grace, and she shook her head slightly, pleading with him not to say anything. He swallowed the words that wanted to come out. "Mr. Everett, I need to speak with Grace for a moment. Is that all right?" John waved a weak hand, and Grace followed Gabriel out of the room. Once they were on the porch, Gabriel turned to her. "You have to tell him the truth about Thornton." "No," Grace said firmly. "I will not destroy his final hours with that knowledge." "Grace, I found out something. Thornton is planning to sell your ranch to a mining company after the wedding. Your father's legacy is gone either way." Grace went very still. "What?" "He's been bragging about it in town. Says the land has silver and he can make a fortune. This whole marriage arrangement is just a way for him to get the land cheap." Grace sat down on the porch steps, looking stunned. "So everything is for nothing. My sacrifice means nothing." "It means you can walk away," Gabriel said urgently, sitting beside her. "You can tell Thornton the deal is off. Your father does not have to know. He will be gone in a day or two, and you can tell him the wedding is still happening. Let him die in peace. But after he is gone, you do not have to go through with it. Richard will take the ranch anyway once my father dies. The debt does not disappear." "Let him have it," Gabriel said. "It is just land, Grace. Your life is worth more than dirt and buildings." Grace looked at him with those green eyes that haunted his dreams. "Where would I go? What would I do? I have no money, no family besides my father. Richard owns this entire town." "You would come with me," Gabriel said. "We would leave Belmont and go somewhere fresh, somewhere nobody knows us. I have been saving money for years to buy my own land. It is not much, but it is enough for us to start over somewhere." "You barely know me," Grace said again, but this time there was hope in her voice. "I know enough," Gabriel said. "I know you are kind and strong and brave. I know that when I am with you, I feel like I have found something I did not even know I was searching for. I know that I am in love with you, Grace Everett, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving to you that you made the right choice by choosing me." Grace's eyes filled with tears again. "I am in love with you too. I do not understand it, but I am. When you showed up that first day and offered to walk with me, I felt something shift. Every time I see you, it gets stronger. The thought of marrying Richard while feeling this way about you has been torture." Gabriel cupped her face gently in his hands. "Then do not marry him. Choose me instead. Choose us." "I'm scared," Grace whispered. "I am scared too," Gabriel admitted, "but I'm more scared of losing you." They sat there on the porch, foreheads touching, until the doctor came out and cleared his throat. "Miss Everett, you should come inside. Your father is asking for you." Grace squeezed Gabriel's hand and went inside. Gabriel waited on the porch, his heart pounding. Everything was happening so fast, but he knew this was right. He and Grace belonged together. He could feel it in his bones. An hour later, Grace came back outside. Her face was pale. "He's gone. My father just died." Gabriel stood and pulled her into his arms. Grace held onto him and cried quietly while the doctor came and went, making arrangements for the undertaker. When they were finally alone, Gabriel led Grace to the porch swing and sat with her. "I'm so sorry," he said softly. "He died thinking I was going to be taken care of," Grace said. He died happy. That is something at least. What do you want to do now? Gabriel asked gently. Grace was quiet for a long time. Finally, she looked up at him. I want to run away with you. I want to leave this place and never look back. But Richard will come after us. He does not like to lose. Let him try, Gabriel said fiercely. I will protect you. He has money and power and men who do his bidding, Grace said. We would be running for the rest of our lives. Then we run, Gabriel said simply. As long as I am with you, I do not care where we are. Grace kissed him then, a soft, desperate kiss that tasted like tears and hope. Gabriel kissed her back, pouring all his feelings into it. When they finally pulled apart, Grace was smiling for the first time since he had met her. We will need a plan, she said. Richard will hear about my father's death within hours. He will expect me to go through with the wedding anyway, since the debt still exists. When I do not show up, he will come looking. We leave tonight, Gabriel said, after the undertaker takes your father. Pack whatever you can carry. I will come back with horses and supplies. We will head west, maybe to California. There are opportunities there for people willing to work hard. What about Thomas Chapman and his family? Grace asked. Richard will retaliate against them for helping us. Gabriel had already thought about that. Thomas is tougher than he looks, and he has been wanting an excuse to stand up to Thornton for years. I will talk to him, but we need to move fast. They spent the next few hours making arrangements. The undertaker came and took John Everett's body. Grace packed a small bag with clothes and a few treasured items. Gabriel rode back to the Chapman ranch and told Thomas everything. About damn time somebody stood up to that bastard, Thomas said. You take care of that girl, Gabriel. She deserves better than what life has given her so far. I will, Gabriel promised, but Thornton will come after you when he figures out you helped us. Thomas grinned. Let him try. I've been dealing with bullies since before he was born. Besides, my boys are good shots, and we have friends in this territory. Thornton is not as untouchable as he thinks. Gabriel gathered his savings and supplies. Thomas gave him 2 good horses and enough food for a week. There is a trading post about 3 days west of here. Man who runs it is a friend of mine. Tell him I sent you and he will help you get set up wherever you are headed. I do not know how to thank you, Gabriel said. Just be happy, Thomas said. That is thanks enough. Gabriel rode back to the Everett ranch just as the sun was setting. Grace was waiting for him, dressed in traveling clothes with her hair braided simply. She looked scared but determined. Are you sure about this? Gabriel asked. No, Grace said honestly, but I am sure about you. That is enough. They mounted up and rode west as the stars came out. Gabriel kept checking behind them, expecting to see Thornton and his men in pursuit, but the road stayed empty. They rode through the night, putting as much distance as possible between themselves and Belmont. As dawn broke, they stopped to rest the horses and eat some of the food Thomas had packed. Grace was quiet, staring back in the direction they had come. Having regrets? Gabriel asked softly. Just thinking about my father, Grace said. I hope he would understand. Any father who truly loved his daughter would want her to be safe and happy, Gabriel said, even if it meant losing the ranch. They rode for 3 more days, crossing into California territory. The landscape changed gradually, becoming more varied with pine forests and mountains in the distance. At night, they made camp and talked for hours, learning everything about each other. Gabriel told Grace about growing up in Texas, about his own father dying when he was 15 and having to become a man overnight. Grace told him about her mother's death, about the loneliness of caring for a sick parent while watching their dreams crumble. But they also talked about hopes and dreams. Gabriel wanted land of his own where he could raise cattle and horses. Grace wanted a garden and children and a simple, peaceful life. They both wanted the same thing, a home where they felt safe and loved. On the 4th day, they reached the trading post Thomas had mentioned. The owner, a grizzled man named Cal, recognized Thomas's name immediately and welcomed them. Any friend of Thomas Chapman is a friend of mine, Cal said. What can I do for you folks? We need to find land, Gabriel said. Somewhere quiet where we can start over. Cal studied them both. Running from something? Someone, Gabriel admitted. A man in Nevada who does not take kindly to being crossed. Cal nodded slowly. I know the type. There's a valley about 20 miles north of here. Beautiful land, good water, nobody around for miles. The man who owned it died last year with no heirs. It is available for homesteading if you are willing to work hard and meet the requirements." Gabriel and Grace exchanged glances. "We are willing," Grace said. Cal provided them with information and directions. They thanked him and headed north, hope building with every mile. When they finally reached the valley Cal had described, Grace gasped. It was perfect. A wide valley with a stream running through it, surrounded by gentle hills covered in grass and wildflowers. There was even a small cabin that the previous owner had built, weathered but sturdy. "Gabriel," Grace breathed, "it is beautiful." "It is ours if we want it," Gabriel said. "We would have to file a homestead claim and prove the land for 5 years, but then it would belong to us free and clear." Grace turned to him with tears in her eyes. "I want it. I want this life with you." Gabriel dismounted and helped Grace down. They stood in front of the little cabin, hands clasped, and for the first time in weeks, Gabriel felt like he could breathe properly. Over the next few weeks, they worked to make the cabin livable. Gabriel repaired the roof and reinforced the walls, while Grace cleaned and made curtains from fabric they bought at the trading post. They filed their homestead claim with the land office in the nearest town, a place called Cedarville. The clerk barely looked at them, just recorded their names and gave them the paperwork. "You are now legal homesteaders," the clerk said. "Stay on the land for 5 years, make improvements, and it is yours." They celebrated that night by cooking a proper dinner in their new home. It was simple food, beans and cornbread, but it tasted like victory. After dinner, Gabriel took Grace's hand. "We should get married," he said, "properly. I want you to be my wife in the eyes of the law and God." Grace smiled. "I want that too." They married the next week in Cedarville with the local pastor officiating and Cal standing as their witness. Grace wore a simple blue dress and Gabriel wore his cleanest shirt. When the pastor pronounced them husband and wife and told Gabriel he could kiss his bride, Gabriel felt like the luckiest man alive. Their first year on the homestead was hard but happy. Gabriel built a barn and corrals while Grace planted a large garden. They bought a few head of cattle with the last of Gabriel's savings and started building a herd. The work was endless, but they did it together, and that made all the difference. At night, they lay in bed in their little cabin and talked about the future. Gabriel told Grace he wanted at least 4 children. Grace laughed and said they should start with 1 and see how it went. They made love gently, tenderly, learning each other's bodies and souls. Gabriel had never been happier in his entire life, but in the back of his mind, Gabriel always worried that Richard Thornton would find them. He kept a rifle by the door and taught Grace how to shoot. Whenever strangers came by, which was rare, Gabriel was on edge until they left. Grace noticed but did not say anything. She knew the fear was real. They had been on the homestead for 8 months when Martha Thornton showed up. She arrived in a wagon looking thin and bruised, and Gabriel's heart sank. "How did you find us?" he asked as he helped her down. "I have been searching since you left," Martha said. "I finally tracked you through Cal at the trading post. Do not worry, I made sure nobody followed me." Grace came out of the cabin and gasped when she saw Martha's condition. "What did he do to you?" "Richard was furious when you disappeared," Martha said. "He tore apart Belmont looking for you. He threatened Thomas Chapman and anyone else he thought might have helped. When he could not find you, he took his rage out on me. It has been worse than ever." Gabriel felt sick with guilt. "I am so sorry. I never meant for you to suffer because of us." "This is not your fault," Martha said firmly. "My son is a monster, and I am done making excuses for him. I came here to warn you. Richard has not given up looking. He has hired men to search the territory. He is obsessed with finding Grace and making her pay for humiliating him." "How much time do we have?" Gabriel asked. "I do not know," Martha admitted, "but he is getting closer. Someone in Cedarville might have seen you. Richard has money, and he's willing to spend it all to find you." Grace took Martha's hand. "You should stay here with us. You will be safe." Martha shook her head sadly. "If I disappear too, Richard will know for sure that I helped you. As long as I am in Belmont, he thinks I am just a useless old woman who knows nothing. I can feed you information, warn you if he gets too close." "It is too dangerous," Gabriel protested. "Everything is dangerous now," Martha said, "but I will not let my son destroy any more lives. Grace, you remind me of myself when I was young, before I married Richard's father. You deserve to be happy. I will do whatever it takes to make sure you stay that way." Martha stayed for 2 days, recovering from her injuries and giving them all the information she had. Richard had indeed taken control of the Everett ranch after John died and sold it to a mining company, just as Gabriel had heard. He had also made life miserable for anyone in Belmont who he thought had helped Grace escape. Thomas Chapman was holding his ground, but tensions were high. "Tell Thomas we are grateful," Gabriel said as Martha prepared to leave, "and tell him if things get too bad, he should come here. We have room." "I will," Martha promised. She hugged Grace tightly. "Be happy, dear girl. Live the life I never got to have." After Martha left, Gabriel and Grace held each other in the doorway of their cabin. "We might have to run again," Gabriel said quietly. "Then we run," Grace said. "As long as we are together, I can face anything." But they did not have to run. 3 months later, Cal arrived with news. "Richard Thornton is dead," he said without preamble. Gabriel and Grace stared at him in shock. "What happened?" "Tried to beat his mother one too many times," Cal said. "She finally fought back, stabbed him with a kitchen knife. The sheriff ruled it self-defense after Martha showed them years' worth of injuries and got several people in Belmont to testify about Richard's violence. She is a free woman now." Grace started crying, tears of relief streaming down her face. Gabriel held her while his own eyes burned. It was over. They were safe. "There is more," Cal said. "Martha Thornton wants to give you the money from Richard's estate, says you deserve it after what her son tried to do to you." "We do not want his money," Gabriel said immediately. "It is not his anymore," Cal pointed out. "It is Martha's, and she wants you to have it. Says it is the least she can do." In the end, they accepted enough money to buy more cattle and supplies, and they sent the rest back with Cal to be distributed to the people in Belmont that Richard had hurt over the years. It felt right, using Richard's wealth to undo some of the damage he had caused. Life on the homestead settled into a comfortable rhythm after that. Without the fear of Richard Thornton hanging over them, Gabriel and Grace could finally relax and enjoy their life together. Grace's garden flourished, and Gabriel's herd grew steadily. They made friends with their few neighbors and became part of the small community around Cedarville. A year and a half after they married, Grace told Gabriel she was pregnant. He was so happy he picked her up and spun her around, then immediately set her down carefully as if she might break. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," Grace laughed. Their son was born on a cold winter morning, healthy and loud and perfect. They named him John, after Grace's father, and Thomas, after the man who had helped them escape. Little John Thomas Lancaster had his mother's green eyes and his father's dark hair, and Gabriel thought he was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen besides Grace herself. Martha Thornton visited when John was 3 months old. She was healthier now, with color in her cheeks and a smile that reached her eyes. She held her grandson, for she insisted on being called Grandma Martha, and cried happy tears. "Don, I never thought I would live to see such joy," she said. "Thank you for giving this to an old woman who did not think she deserved happiness." "You are family," Grace said firmly. "You will always have a place with us." Thomas Chapman and his sons visited too, bringing gifts for the baby and congratulations for the new parents. "You two did good," Thomas said, clapping Gabriel on the back. "Started out running from trouble and ended up building something real." As the years passed, the homestead prospered. Gabriel proved the land and received the official deed after their 5 years were up. They added onto the cabin, making it a proper house with multiple bedrooms. Their herd grew to over 100 head of cattle, and they broke and sold horses on the side. Grace's garden became famous in the area for its produce. They had 3 more children over the next 6 years, a daughter named Sarah with Grace's auburn hair, then twin boys who kept everyone busy with their energy and mischief. The house was always full of noise and laughter and love. Gabriel never forgot that moment when he first saw Grace crying outside the general store in Belmont while Richard Thornton held her arm too tightly. He never forgot the desperation in her eyes or the way she had said her happiness did not matter. Looking at her now, playing with their children in front of the house they had built together, he was grateful beyond words that he had found the courage to say those words that changed both their lives. "You cannot marry that man," he had told her. It seemed so simple now, but in that moment it had been the hardest and most important thing he had ever said. Grace caught him watching and smiled, that brilliant smile that still made his heart race even after all these years. She walked over and took his hand, lacing their fingers together just like she had that first time on her father's porch. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "How lucky I am," Gabriel said. "How different our lives would be if I had not stopped to help that day in Belmont." "I think about that too sometimes," Grace admitted. "I think about the life I almost had, married to Richard, beaten and broken and miserable. Then I look at what we have now, and it feels like a miracle." "You are my miracle," Gabriel said, pulling her close. "Every single day." Their children ran over, demanding attention and asking when dinner would be ready. Gabriel scooped up the twins while Grace took Sarah's hand, and they all went inside together. The house smelled like the bread Grace had been baking, and the table was set for their evening meal. This was what Gabriel had dreamed about all those years ago when he was a young cowboy drifting from job to job. A home, a family, a woman who loved him, land that belonged to him. It had seemed impossible then, as distant as the stars. But he had found Grace. Or maybe she had found him. Either way, they had saved each other from lives that would have broken them. Now they had built something beautiful and lasting, something they could pass down to their children and their children's children. That night, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Gabriel and Grace sat on their porch watching the stars. The valley spread out before them, bathed in moonlight, peaceful and perfect. "Do you ever regret it?" Gabriel asked quietly. "Leaving your father's ranch? Running away with a cowboy you barely knew?" Grace turned to look at him, her green eyes bright in the darkness. "Not for a single second. That ranch was just land, Gabriel. You gave me a home. You gave me love. You gave me a life worth living. I would make the same choice 1,000 times over." Gabriel kissed her then, soft and sweet, and felt that same spark he had felt the very first time. Some things never faded, he realized. Some love just grew deeper with time. "I love you, Grace Lancaster," he said. "I love you too, Gabriel Lancaster," she replied, "forever and always." They sat together in the peaceful darkness, hands clasped, hearts full. Two people who had found each other against all odds and built a life together in the Wild West. Two people who had faced down fear and violence and uncertainty and come out the other side stronger and happier. Years later, when their grandchildren asked how they met, Gabriel and Grace would smile at each other and tell them the story. About a cowboy who saw a woman in trouble and decided to help. About a woman who had the courage to choose love over duty. About a dangerous man who got what he deserved, and two people who found their happy ending in a beautiful valley far from where they started. And their grandchildren would sigh happily and ask to hear it again, because even though they knew how it ended, they never got tired of hearing about how Grandma and Grandpa fell in love. The homestead stayed in the Lancaster family for generations. That little cabin Gabriel and Grace had claimed became a sprawling ranch that their descendants worked and loved. The valley remained as beautiful as the day Gabriel and Grace first saw it, and the family made sure to preserve it and care for it just as their ancestors had. On the mantel in the main house, there was a photograph taken when photography finally came to their part of California. It showed an older Gabriel and Grace standing in front of their home, surrounded by their children and grandchildren. Gabriel's hand was around Grace's waist and she was leaning into him, and anyone who looked at that photograph could see the love between them. Beneath the photograph was a small plaque that one of their great-grandchildren had made. It said simply, "They chose love, and love chose them back." It was the truest thing anyone had ever said about Gabriel and Grace Lancaster. They had chosen love when it would have been easier to give in to fear and desperation. They had chosen each other when logic said they barely knew one another. They had chosen hope when everything seemed hopeless, and in return, they received a lifetime of happiness, surrounded by family and love, in a home they built together in the Wild West. Their story became legend in the area, a reminder that sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is fight for the life they deserve, no matter what obstacles stand in their way. Martha Thornton lived to be 83 years old. She spent her final years on the homestead with Gabriel and Grace, beloved by their children and grandchildren. She never remarried, saying she had seen enough of marriage to know that what Gabriel and Grace had was rare and special. When she died peacefully in her sleep, she was buried on the property she had helped her surrogate children claim, under a tree Grace had planted years before. Thomas Chapman remained a friend until his own death. He visited often and was considered part of the family. His sons and Gabriel's children grew up together, and eventually some of them married, binding the families even closer. Cal at the trading post became wealthy as the area developed, but he never forgot the young couple who had come to him running from danger. He made sure their homestead claim went through without issues and helped them navigate the legal requirements. Grace and Gabriel named one of their twin sons Cal in his honor, and the old trader cried when they told him. As for Richard Thornton's legacy, it crumbled after his death. The businesses he had built through intimidation and violence were sold off or failed. His name became synonymous with cruelty in Belmont, a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power. The mining company that bought the Everett Ranch found no silver and eventually abandoned it. The land went back to the government and was eventually bought by a young couple who reminded people of Gabriel and Grace, full of hope and determination. But Gabriel and Grace never looked back. They had escaped that life and built something better. Every morning when Gabriel woke up with Grace beside him, he thanked whatever forces had brought them together. Every evening when they sat on their porch watching the sunset, Grace squeezed his hand and smiled, and he knew she felt the same way. Their love story was not complicated or tragic. It was simple and true. A cowboy saw a woman who needed help. He learned her betrothed beat his own mother regularly. He said, "You cannot marry that man." And she listened. They ran away together, built a life together, and loved each other until their final days. When Gabriel died at 72, surrounded by his children and grandchildren with Grace holding his hand, his last words were, "I would do it all again." Grace lived another 5 years after Gabriel passed. She spent that time with her family, sharing stories and wisdom, tending her beloved garden, and visiting Gabriel's grave every single day. When it was finally her time, she went peacefully, and her children buried her next to the man she had loved for over 50 years. On their shared headstone, their children inscribed both their names in a simple message, "Together forever, as it was always meant to be." And in that beautiful valley in California, where the stream still runs clear and the grass still grows green, the Lancaster family continues to thrive, built on the foundation of courage and love that Gabriel and Grace established all those years ago when they chose each other over fear, hope over despair, and love over everything else. Their story lived on, passed down through generations, a testament to the power of standing up for what is right and fighting for the life you deserve. It reminded everyone who heard it that sometimes love comes when you least expect it, from the most unlikely sources, and that when you find it, you have to be brave enough to grab hold with both hands and never let go. Gabriel and Grace did exactly that. They grabbed hold of love in each other, and they built a beautiful life in the Wild West that lasted long after they were gone. Their descendants still work that land, still tell their story, still believe in the kind of love that changes everything. And every year on the anniversary of the day Gabriel first saw Grace crying outside that general store in Belmont, Nevada, the Lancaster family gathers at the homestead. They share a meal, tell stories, and raise a glass to the cowboy and the woman who started it all. They toast to courage, to love, to standing up for what is right even when it is terrifying. They toast to Gabriel and Grace, the two people who proved that sometimes the best love stories are the ones where someone simply says, "You cannot marry that man," and means it with their whole heart. The ones where two people decide that being together is worth any risk, any sacrifice, any challenge. Those are the love stories that last forever, passed down through generations, inspiring others to be brave enough to choose love when it seems impossible. And that was exactly what Gabriel and Grace's love story did for everyone who heard it, then and now and always.